This is my true story. I worked my whole life for my family, building a house with my hands, believing it would be a home of love and respect. But instead of gratitude, I was given cruelty. My wife turned that house into my prison. She locked me in the basement without food, without water, without care for my dignity. I sat in the dark, humiliated, but not broken, because while she thought she had control, I still held the deed. I sold the house while she slept and left her with nothing. Before I tell you what happened, comment where you're watching from, and please subscribe so my story can reach more people. I spent decades working with my hands, breaking my back every single day so that my family could have a roof over their heads. Every morning, I woke up before the sun, leaving home when the streets were still empty, and I worked until the sky was dark again. I saved every dollar I could, cutting down on my own needs so that my wife would never feel the hunger or hardship I felt when I was younger. The house we lived in was not just walls and windows to me. It was the result of every drop of sweat, every calloused hand, and every aching muscle. I poured my life into that home. It was supposed to be the place where love lived, where respect grew, and where loyalty was unshakable. I believed my wife valued the sacrifices I made. I thought she saw the long hours, the tired eyes, the way I kept pushing, even when my body begged me to rest, and I believed she respected me for it. I thought she looked at our home with pride, knowing it was built not by strangers, not by money handed down, but by her husband's hard work. I thought every nail and every brick carried proof of my devotion to her. I believed she would never forget the nights I came home with nothing in my pockets, but still smiled, because I knew tomorrow I would try again. The house became more than a shelter. It became a symbol of my life. Every corner carried a story. Every piece of furniture was bought through sacrifice. Every improvement was another step I had taken to give her a better life. I thought she loved the home as much as I did. I thought she loved me for making it possible. For years I believed that the bond we shared was built as strong as the walls of the house. I believed that nothing could shake it. But as the years passed, I began to notice changes. The respect I once thought I saw in her eyes started to fade. She no longer looked at me with gratitude. Instead, she looked at me as if I were a burden. The home I built with pride slowly became the place where she reminded me of my age, my tired body, and the fact that I could not work as hard as before. Instead of comfort, her words turned sharp. Instead of love, her tone carried irritation, and yet I kept silent because I told myself it was only stress, only frustration, nothing deeper. I never imagined that the woman I had worked so hard for would one day turn the house into my prison. I never imagined that the same walls I built with sacrifice would echo with humiliation instead of love. I thought of the years I had bent my back, the friendships I had lost, the youth I had given away to keep her safe, and I believed she would stand by me no matter what. But I was wrong. My sacrifices were real. My love was real. My loyalty was real. Hers was not. The night that changed everything began with an argument, one of those moments that start small but grow sharp because the respect is already gone. I do not even remember the exact words that triggered it, but I remember her anger, her face twisted with contempt, her voice louder than it had ever been. I tried to stay calm, tried to remind her of the years I had given, but she had no interest in listening. She shouted that I was worthless, that the house stood because of her patience, not my labor, and that I was nothing but a weak old man. Before I could respond, she shoved me hard toward the basement door. I stumbled down the first step, my hands reaching for the railing, and before I could climb back up, she slammed the door shut. The sound of the lock clicking echoed in the darkness, and I stood frozen, unable to believe what had just happened. At first, I thought it was just another cruel outburst, that she would open the door after a few minutes once her anger faded. But the minutes stretched into hours, and the hours stretched into the night. I sat on the cold floor, my throat dry, my stomach empty, listening to the silence above me. There was no water, no food, not even the dignity of a blanket. The place that once stored old tools and boxes had become my prison, and my wife was the one who had put me there. The thirst was the worst. My lips cracked, my tongue felt like sand, and every swallow was painful. I knocked on the door at first, weakly, hoping she would hear, hoping she would feel some shred of compassion. But no answer came. I called out once, then twice, but the house remained silent. I realized then that she was not going to open the door. She wanted me to sit there in the dark, to feel powerless, to feel small. The humiliation burned deeper than any insult she had ever spoken. As the hours passed, my body ached, but it was my heart that hurt most. I thought about how far we had fallen. I thought of the man I had once been, the provider, the protector, the one who made sure she never suffered. Now I was the one suffering, and it was by her choice. The woman who should have been my partner had turned into my jailer. The house I had built with pride had become the cage where my dignity was stripped from me. By the time the night ended, I was no longer the same man. Something inside me broke in that basement. But in its place, something else awakened. As I sat alone on the cold basement floor, I had nothing but my thoughts to keep me company. The darkness pressed in from every corner, and the silence was heavy except for the sound of my own breathing. I leaned against the wall, my body weak from thirst, but my mind sharper than it had ever been. I began to think about my life, about the years I had given away so freely, about the sacrifices I made that no one ever saw. I remembered working in the rain, in the snow, in the heat of summer, pushing myself harder than I should have, all so she would never know hunger or hardship. I remembered nights I came home exhausted, barely able to lift my arms, but still managed to put food on the table and a smile on my face because I wanted her to feel safe. All those memories now felt like chains, proof that I had given everything to someone who did not deserve it. In the stillness, I realized that love had long ago been replaced by control. She no longer saw me as her husband, but as something she could order around, humiliate, and now imprison. I thought about the way her tone had changed over the years, how kindness turned to irritation, how gratitude turned to insults, how laughter turned into mockery. It was not sudden. It had been growing slowly, and I had ignored it, telling myself it was stress, age, or the weight of life. But sitting in that basement, I could no longer lie to myself. The truth was clear. She did not respect me. She did not value me, and she had no love left for me. The darkness forced me to confront my own blindness. I asked myself why I had stayed so long, why I had allowed myself to become the target of her cruelty. The answer hurt. Because I loved her. Because I believed loyalty meant staying no matter what. Because I thought my sacrifices would eventually be enough. But they never were. Nothing I gave ever satisfied her, and the more I gave, the more she took. My silence had been my weakness, and she had used it to break me down piece by piece. But as I sat there, another thought grew inside me. If she could turn my house into a prison, then I could turn her pride into rubble. If she could humiliate me in the dark, then I could humiliate her in the light. I did not need to shout or fight. I did not need to waste my energy on anger. What I needed was patience, planning, and the will to act when the time was right. In that basement, something inside me hardened. The man who once endured everything silently was gone. The man who rose from that darkness was ready to take back control. When she finally opened the basement door, the morning light came in sharp, almost blinding after the hours I had spent in darkness. She looked at me with a smirk, as if locking me down there was a lesson I needed to learn. She did not say sorry. She did not show guilt. Instead, she told me to get up, drink some water, and not cause trouble again. I did as she said in silence. I drank the water slowly, feeling it ease the burning in my throat, but my heart was no longer the same. Something inside me had changed. Where there had once been devotion, there was now only resolve. I realized at that moment that I could not live with her cruelty any longer. For years I had told myself to endure, to stay calm, to forgive her words, her temper, her insults. But being locked in the basement without food or water, left like an unwanted object in my own home, showed me the truth. Love was long gone. Respect had been buried years ago. What remained was only her control and my silence. And I decided then that my silence would no longer serve her. From that day forward, it would serve me. I said nothing to her. I let her believe she had broken me. I let her think she had won, that she had beaten down every last piece of my pride. But in my silence, I was planning. In my silence, I was building the strength she thought I had lost. Every glance I gave her was calm, but inside my mind was turning. I knew I could not shout. I knew I could not fight. I knew I could not change her, but I could end this life and take back what was mine. That day became the breaking point of my life. I was done being humiliated. I was done being treated like less than human. I was done carrying the weight of loyalty for someone who did not deserve it. I promised myself, as I sat quietly in that kitchen, sipping water while she mocked me, that I would not live another year, another month, another week in this prison she had created. My revenge would not be loud, it would not be messy, it would be silent, permanent, and final. She had locked me in the basement, but I would lock her out of the life she thought was hers. After that breaking point, I began to prepare in silence. She believed she had crushed me, but in truth, she had only awakened me. Every night when she fell asleep, I moved quietly through the house, gathering the papers and documents I needed, the deed to the house, the bank information, the identification papers. Everything that gave me ownership and power was still in my name. She never noticed because she thought I was too broken to think clearly, but I was not broken, I was calculating. Each paper I placed into a folder felt like a brick being laid in the foundation of my escape. I contacted a lawyer, not the kind that served her pride, but one who understood speed and discretion. I told him everything needed to be done quietly. The house had to be listed and sold without her knowledge. He nodded, and together we began the process. Every call I made from outside. Every paper I signed while she slept or while she left the house. She had no idea that the very walls she mocked me in, the very house she thought she controlled, was already slipping from her hands. During the day, I kept my silence. I played the role of the obedient husband, nodding when she gave orders, lowering my head when she mocked me, pretending I was the weak man she believed I had become. It was not easy. Every insult burned, every look of superiority cut deep. But I held on to the knowledge that soon, very soon, her arrogance would be her downfall. The papers were being signed, the sale was being prepared, and she had no idea. At night, I would sit in my chair, looking around the house I had built. I thought of all the years I had poured into it, the sacrifices I made to keep it standing, and I told myself that if she could turn it into my prison, then I had the right to turn it into her ruin. My preparation was not just about leaving, it was about making sure she felt what I had felt, powerless, helpless, stripped of control. Every silent step I took brought me closer to that moment. While I worked quietly on my plan, she laughed at me. She thought my silence was weakness, but in truth, it was my shield. Every day she mocked me, calling me useless, telling me I was too old to make decisions, and bragging that without her, the house would fall apart. She believed I had no strength left, no fight left, no dignity left. Her words cut, but they also fueled me. Every insult she threw became another reason to keep moving forward with my plan. I let her think she had broken me, because the more she believed it, the less she looked at what I was really doing. She would walk around the house like a queen, giving orders as if I were a servant. She told friends and family that I had grown weak and that she carried the weight of everything now. They believed her lies because I stayed quiet and let them. I let the mask stay on my face, calm and submissive, while behind it, I was working faster than she could imagine. My silence was the perfect disguise. What she never realized was that the deed to the house was in my name. The years of sacrifice, the long hours of work, had secured that. She never questioned it, never even asked to see the papers, because she thought control came from her voice, her attitude, her cruelty. But true control was written in ink, and that ink carried only my name. While she mocked, I signed. While she laughed, I met with buyers. While she bragged about her power, I prepared to strip it away. Looking back, I almost smile at how blind her arrogance made her. She was so sure she had me under her thumb that she never looked close enough to see the trap forming around her. And that was the heart of my deception. Letting her believe she had already won, when in reality, she was standing on the edge of losing everything. The day of the sale came quietly, just like I had planned. I met the buyers in a lawyer's office across town, far from the eyes of anyone who might talk. The papers were stacked neatly on the table, waiting for my signature. My hand shook for a moment, not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. I thought of the years I spent building that house, every nail, every board, every drop of sweat poured into it. I thought of the night she locked me in the basement, the thirst, the humiliation, the shame. And then I signed. With each stroke of the pen, the house slipped further from her grasp. When the last paper was finished, the lawyer slid a document across the desk, showing the money had been transferred into my account. I stared at the numbers for a long moment, and a calm settled over me. My freedom had been bought with my own sacrifice, and now it was secured. I walked out of that office lighter than I had felt in years. The house was no longer mine, no longer hers. It belonged to strangers now, and soon they would take it from her hands while she slept in arrogance. I returned home that evening as if nothing had changed. I walked through the front door, greeted by the same walls that had once been my pride and later my prison. She was in the kitchen, humming to herself, smug in the belief that she still held control. She asked nothing about where I had been, because in her mind, I had no life outside of the one she allowed me. I sat down at the table, ate the food she set out with the same silence as before, and nodded when she made her usual remarks about how I should be grateful for her. She had no idea that the very roof above her head no longer belonged to her. That night, I watched her sleep. She lay in the bed she thought was hers, wrapped in the comfort she thought she had secured forever. I stared at the ceiling, knowing that soon the truth would come crashing down around her. I did not feel guilt. I did not feel pity. I felt justice. For the first time since she locked me in that basement, I felt in control again. The sale was done. The money was mine. And her fall was coming with the sunrise. The night before I left, I packed my few belongings in silence. I didn't need much, just some clothes, my documents, and the savings I had secured from the sale. Everything else could stay behind because it no longer mattered. The house she thought belonged to her was already gone, and soon she would learn that in the cruelest way possible. I moved slowly, careful not to wake her as she slept. She snored lightly in the bedroom, unaware that every sound of zippers and drawers closing was me preparing my escape. For years I had been trapped, humiliated, treated like less than a man, but now I was slipping out with peace in my heart. I looked around the house one last time. The walls that had once held my pride, the furniture I had bought with years of work, the floor I had repaired with my own hands, none of it felt like mine anymore. She had poisoned it with her cruelty, and I no longer wanted it. I walked through the kitchen, the living room, the hallway, and I realized I felt nothing. No attachment, no regret, just freedom waiting at the door. When I finally stepped outside, the night air hit my face like a blessing. The cool breeze carried away years of shame, and the stars above felt like witnesses to my quiet revenge. I walked down the path without looking back. Each step was lighter than the last, each breath deeper than the one before. For the first time in decades, I felt like I owned myself again. She was still asleep in that bed, dreaming in arrogance, never once suspecting that she would wake up to find her world gone. I left her no note, no warning, no words. I wanted the silence to be the sharpest blade. In the morning, when strangers arrived to claim the house, she would know what I had done. And by then, I would already be far away, free from the prison she built. The next morning, while I was already miles away, the strangers arrived at the house with moving trucks. She woke up to the sound of voices outside, confused at first, thinking it was just neighbors. But when she looked through the window, she saw people she didn't know walking up the driveway, holding papers with their names on them, papers signed and sealed that proved the house was no longer hers. She rushed to the door, shouting, demanding to know what they were doing, but the buyers calmly told her the truth, that the house had been sold, the money transferred, and the property no longer belonged to her. She screamed that it was impossible, that I could never do such a thing, but the documents in their hands were stronger than her denial. I was not there to see it, but I can imagine her face when the reality hit. The shock first, then the rage, then the panic as she realized the walls she had mocked me in, the rooms she had controlled, the basement she had locked me in. All of it was gone. She had nothing left. The neighbors came out to watch, whispers spreading through the street as they saw her shouting, flailing, trying to fight what was already done. The same pride she once carried now crumbled in front of everyone. The woman who thought she had all the power was now powerless. Inside the house, she ran from room to room, realizing every inch of it no longer belonged to her. She saw strangers marking spaces, preparing to move in, and she could not stop them. She begged, she threatened, she wept, but none of it mattered. Her arrogance had blinded her to the truth, and now it was too late. Everything she thought was hers slipped away in one morning. Her humiliation was complete. The same house she used to cage me had become the stage of her downfall. She was left with nothing but her shame and the bitter memory of the man she thought she had broken. The cruel part for her was that I hadn't yelled, I hadn't fought, I had simply acted in silence, and silence destroyed her more than words ever could. When I left that house behind, I left more than walls and rooms. I left behind years of humiliation, years of insults, years of pain that had worn me down. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I had money from the sale, enough to live the rest of my days without begging anyone for help. I rented a small place in a quiet town where no one knew my story, and every morning I woke up with peace in my chest. I no longer heard her voice mocking me. I no longer felt the cold of the basement floor under my body. I no longer carried the shame of being treated like less than a man. Justice had not come through anger. It had not come through shouting or fighting. It had come through patience and silence. She had thought she held the power, but I proved that real power rests with the one who can act without warning. She locked me in the basement, thinking she had broken me. But in the end, I locked her out of the very life she thought she owned. That was the justice I gave myself. I knew she would never recover from it. She lost her home, the comfort she thought was hers forever, and the pride she used to carry in front of others. People whispered about what happened, and those whispers cut deeper than any argument. She was left with nothing but her own shame, and that was more fitting than anything I could have said to her face. For me, there was no need to look back. I did not visit, I did not call, I did not explain. The silence was my answer. Every day I lived afterward was a reminder that I had taken my dignity back. I had shown her that cruelty has a cost, and she paid it in full. Final thought, she locked me in the basement. I locked her out of the life she thought was hers.